Welcome to another slow descent into the quiet where memory is shaped by hand. Tonight's story begins with a touch, the first touch that seals a final breath behind lips of wax and rose oil, beneath marble and candlelight, in a chamber deep under Topkapi Palace. The wax lip maker works in silence, crafting the last expression each soul will ever wear. But her fingers move through centuries-old rituals, guided by the smoke of sacred herbs, the rustle of silk shrouds, the whispers of those who came before. Here, every curve of wax is a prayer, every restored smile, a bridge between the living and the dead. Let the shadows hold you, let the warm glow guide you. And if these quiet wanderings bring you comfort, you might consider subscribing or telling us where and when you're listening from. Now, close your eyes and step into the chamber where beauty is the last thing death will ever see. The stone steps descend in a gentle spiral, worn smooth by centuries of careful footfalls. Each step leads deeper beneath the earth, deeper beneath the sprawling courtyards of Topkapi Palace, where above the muezzin's call echoes across the Golden Horn, and the last merchants fold their carpets in the grand bazaar. But here, in these hushed chambers carved from living rock, time moves differently. Here, beneath the weight of marble and the whispered prayers of the dead, she works in the amber glow of tallow candles. The wax lip maker moves through her domain with the fluid grace of long practice. Her bare feet make no sound against the cool stone floor. The air carries the mingled scents of beeswax and rose oil, of frankincense drifting from distant chambers, and beneath it all, the clean mineral smell of deep earth. Her workspace lies at the heart of this underground realm-domed chamber, where shadows dance across curved walls, where candlelight pools in ancient niches carved for forgotten saints. Tonight, as on every night for the past 7 years, she prepares her tools with ritual precision. The marble slab gleams pale in the flickering light, its surface polished to mirror smoothness by her own hands. Around its edges, brass bowls hold her materials, golden beeswax softened to the perfect consistency, rose oil from the gardens of Bursa, finest ash from burned cedar, and water drawn from the sacred well beneath the Sulaimani Mosque. Each substance has been blessed by the court imam, each tool consecrated for this most delicate of arts. She lifts a piece of beeswax between her fingers, testing its warmth and pliability. The wax yields like silk to her touch, soft as morning butter, ready to be shaped into the curves and fullness that will give peace to the dead. This is her gift, her calling to craft lips that speak of serenity in silence, to passion smiles that will carry the departed into their eternal rest with dignity and grace. The heavy curtain at the chamber's entrance stirs, and she knows without looking that a new charge has arrived. The bearers move with practiced quiet, their sandaled feet whispering against stone as they carry their burden on a stretcher of woven palm fronds. She does not turn to watch as they lay the body upon her marble table, does not meet their eyes as they retreat with bowed heads. This work requires a certain sacred distance, a reverence that words would only diminish. When she finally approaches the table, the candlelight reveals a woman perhaps 30 years of age, her skin the color of honey, her dark hair still adorned with the pearl pins of a palace concubine. In life, this woman would have walked the marble corridors above her silk slippers, silent on polished floors, her presence gracing the gardens where nightingales sang among the jasmine. Now she lies still as carved alabaster, her features composed in the blank neutrality of death. The wax lip maker studies the face before her with the eye of an artist. She sees the high cheekbones that spoke of noble birth, the long lashes that once fluttered with life and laughter, the small hands that once traced calligraphy with a reed pen dipped in gold ink. But it is the lips that hold her attention pale now, slightly parted, bearing the faint indentations of teeth, telling in their stillness the story of a life interrupted. She warms a portion of wax between her palms, feeling its transformation, from solid to malleable, from cold to warm. The material seems to absorb the heat of her skin, becoming part of her in this moment of creation. Around her the chamber breathes with the rhythm of centuries. The stone walls have witnessed this same ritual performed by her predecessors, women whose names are lost to time, but whose work continues in the eternal cycle of death and remembrance. From adjacent chambers comes the soft whisper of activity. The linen binder works with silk so fine it seems woven from moonbeams, her fingers creating knots that will hold through the centuries. The sound of her work is barely audible, the whisper of thread through fabric, the gentle settling of cloth against cloth. Sometimes, when the night is very still, the wax lip maker can hear the soft exhalation of the woman's breath, as she concentrates on some particularly intricate binding. In another chamber, the herbal burner tends his bronze brazier, adding pinches of resin that release clouds of sacred smoke. His voice occasionally rises in barely audible verse, ancient poems that speak of paradise gardens and rivers of milk and honey. The words drift through the connecting passages like incense, wrapping around the workers in their separate chambers, binding them together in their shared purpose. The wax lip maker begins her work with the gentlest of touches. She smooths the wax across the woman's lips, building up their natural fullness, restoring the curves that death has flattened. Her fingers know instinctively how to shape the delicate bow of the upper lip, how to create the soft pillow of the lower lip that speaks of youth and beauty. The wax warms under her touch, becoming supple and responsive, as if the life that once animated this flesh is flowing back through her careful ministrations. The work requires absolute concentration. Each stroke of her finger must be perfect, each curve precisely calculated to create not just beauty, but the particular beauty that belonged to this individual woman. The wax lip maker has developed over the years an almost mystical ability to read the faces of the dead, to see in their features the echoes of who they were in life. She shapes the lips not as they appear now, but as they lived quick to smile, perhaps, or given to thoughtful silence, or touched always with the faintest suggestion of secret knowledge. As she works, the wax gradually takes on the temperature of the body beneath it. creating a seamless transition between the natural and the crafted. The woman's face begins to transform under her touch, the pallor of death giving way to something that suggests peaceful sleep rather than eternal rest. The lips she is creating curve gently upward at the corners, a subtle smile that speaks of contentment, of a soul at peace with its journey from this world to the next. The candles flicker in the slight draught that moves through the chamber, their flames dancing like spirits in the amber air. The shadows on the walls shift and change, creating the illusion that the stone itself is alive, breathing with the rhythm of the world above. From somewhere far, overhead comes the faint sound of fountain water in the palace gardens, the liquid music filtering down through layers of earth and stone to reach this buried sanctuary. Time moves differently here, measured not in hours, but in the gradual perfection of her craft. The wax lip maker loses herself in the work, her consciousness narrowing to the small universe of flesh and wax beneath her fingers. The rest of the world fades away, the empire beyond these walls, the politics of the court, the endless cycle of birth and death that brings her each new charge. There is only this moment, this face, this delicate act of restoration. The wax has found its final form now, settled into curves that seem to breathe with their own life. The smile she has created is neither joyful nor sad, but something more profounder, expression of acceptance, of completion, of a life fully lived regardless of its length. It is the smile of one who has loved and been loved, who has walked in gardens full of roses and heard music that spoke to the soul. She steps back to examine her work in the shifting candlelight. The woman's face has been transformed, no longer bearing the harsh finality of death, but instead suggesting the gentle transition of sleep. The wax lips seem warm and soft, as if at any moment they might part to whisper some final blessing, some last endearment to the living world they are leaving behind. From the chamber where the linen binder works comes the soft rustle of silk being smoothed, the whisper of fabric being arranged with infinite care. Soon this body will be wrapped in those precious cloths, cocooned in silk that will preserve it through the centuries, carrying the smile the wax lip maker has created into whatever realm awaits beyond the grave. The herbal burner's voice rises slightly, his ancient verses speaking of gardens where the righteous rest beside flowing streams. The words seem to wrap around the woman on the marble slab, blessing her journey, sanctifying the transformation that has taken place in this underground sanctuary. The smoke from his brazier drifts through the connecting passages, carrying with it the promise of paradise, the assurance that death is not an ending but a beginning. The wax lip-maker cleans her tools with the same ritual precision with which she prepared them. Each brass bowl is wiped clean, each implement blessed with rose water and set in its proper place. The remaining wax is returned to its container, still warm from her touch, ready for tomorrow's work. The marble slab is cleansed until it gleams like fresh snow, prepared for whatever tomorrow's darkness might bring. As she performs these final rituals, the woman's face seems to glow in the candlelight, the wax lips catching and reflecting the golden flames. until they seem to pulse with their own inner radiance. The smile the wax lip maker has created appears to deepen slightly, as if in acknowledgement of the gift that has been bestowed, the gift of beauty in death, of serenity in transition, of dignity preserved against the ravages of time. The night air in the chamber has grown cooler, the candles burning lower in their brass holders. The wax lip maker extinguishes them one by one, each flame dying with a soft whisper that seems to carry prayers into the darkness. As the last light fades, the chamber settles into the profound quiet of deep earth, the silence broken only by the distant sound of water moving through ancient channels, the eternal heartbeat of the palace above. In the darkness, the wax lips hold their gentle smile, keeping vigil through the hours until dawn brings the final preparations and the journey to the imperial mausoleum. The wax lip maker makes her way through the connecting passages, her bare feet finding the familiar path without need of light. Behind her, the woman rests in peaceful dignity, her face transformed by love and skill into a mask of eternal serenity. The stone steps that lead to the surface seem longer in the darkness, each one carrying her further from the sacred work below. But even as she climbs toward the world of the living, her mind remains with the woman on the marble slab, with a smile she has crafted from wax and devotion, with a quiet miracle that transforms death into something beautiful and profound. Above ground, the palace sleeps under a canopy of stars. Guards walk their silent rounds through corridors where sultans once held court, their footsteps echoing off marble walls that have witnessed centuries of power and intrigue. But below, in the chambers carved from living rock, a different kind of power holds swathe, the power to transform, to heal, to grant dignity to the dead and comfort to the living who must say farewell. The wax lip maker makes her way to her small chamber near the servants' quarters, where a simple bed waits beneath a window that looks out over the Bosphorus. The water gleams like hammered silver in the starlight, carrying ships from distant lands, bearing merchants and pilgrims and dreamers to shores beyond imagination. But her dreams tonight will be of wax and candlelight, of faces transformed by love, of the sacred work that waits in the chambers below. Sleep comes gently, carrying her into darkness that is not empty but full of possibility. In her dreams, the faces she has restored smile back at her from gardens of eternal spring, their wax lips speaking words of gratitude that only she can hear. The work continues even in sleep, the craft living in her hands, the calling flowing through her blood like sacred oil. The palace breathes around her, settling into the deep quiet of night. In the chambers below, the woman waits with her gentle smile, ready for the final journey that will carry her to rest beside the mighty dead of the empire. And in the morning, the wax lip maker will descend once more into her underground realm, where shadows dance and candles flicker, and the ancient craft continues its eternal cycle of death and transformation, love and remembrance, darkness and light. The pre-dawn darkness hangs heavy over the palace as the wax lip maker descends once more into her underground realm. The stone steps are cool beneath her bare feet, each one a familiar friend in the journey downward, away from the world of politics and power, into the sacred space where only truth matters. The air grows cooler as she moves deeper, carrying with it the lingering perfume of yesterday's workrose oil and beeswax, frankincense and cedar ash, the clean scent of marble touched by centuries of careful hands. In her chamber, fresh candles wait in their brass holders, their wicks dark and straight as young reeds. She lights them one by one, each flame blooming like a flower of gold, casting dancing shadows across the curved walls. The light reveals that during the night another form has been placed upon her marble tabbouleh, young man this time, perhaps 25 years of age, his skin bearing the olive tones of the eastern provinces. His beard has been carefully trimmed, his hair arranged with the precision reserved for those who served in the inner palace. A court musician, perhaps, or a scholar who spent his days copying manuscripts in the library where dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon sunlight. She studies his face in the flickering candlelight, reading the story written in the delicate architecture of bone and flesh. Here was a man who smiled often. She can tell from the faint lines around his eyes, lines that speak of laughter shared in the company of friends. His hands, folded across his chest, bear the calluses of one who played the oud, the fingertips slightly flattened from years of pressing strings, coaxing melody from wood and wire. Even in death, his fingers seem poised to find a chord, to fill the silence with music that spoke to the heart. From the adjacent chamber comes the soft whisper of the linen binder at her work. The sound is barely audible silk against silk, the gentle settling of fabric as it finds its proper place. Sometimes the wax lip maker imagines she can hear the woman's breathing, the soft exhalation of concentration as she performs some particularly intricate binding. They have worked in parallel for 3 years now, these two women, their crafts, intertwining like threads in a tapestry, yet they have never spoken. Their communication exists in the rhythm of their work, in the respectful silence they maintain, in the shared understanding that what they do here transcends ordinary conversation. The wax lip maker warms a portion of beeswax between her palms, feeling it transform from the coolness of night into the pliability of clay. The material seems to absorb not just the heat of her skin, but something deeper, the intention, the reverence, the love that she brings to each task. As she works the wax, she allows her mind to drift backward through memory, searching for the right shape, the proper expression for this young man's lips. She remembers faces from her childhood in the village outside Bursa, where her grandmother first taught her to work with clay and beeswax. Old Ake had been a maker of funeral masks, crafting faces from beeswax to place over the dead during the long journey to the cemetery. The face is the mirror of the soul, the old woman had whispered as her gnarled fingers shaped wax with impossible delicacy. When we lose the face, we lose the person. But when we restore the face with love, we preserve the soul for all eternity. Those lessons echo now in the underground chamber as the wax lip maker begins her work on the young musician's lips. She can sense, somehow, that these lips were made for song, not the harsh, proclamations of the marketplace or the clever words of the courtier, but the gentle melodies that spoke of longing and loss, of love discovered and love remembered. She shapes the wax to create lips that seem poised on the edge of song, curved with the memory of music, soft with the echo of verses that once filled moonlit gardens with beauty. The work proceeds slowly, each touch deliberate and reverent. The wax responds to her fingers like a living thing, flowing into curves that seem to breathe with their own life. She builds up the natural fullness of the lower lip, creates the delicate bow of the upper lip that speaks of sensitivity and refinement. But more than mere restoration, she is crafting something that captures the essence of who this man was, the musician, the dreamer, the one whose voice carried prayers and poetry into the perfumed air of palace evenings. Bow as she works. Footsteps approach through the connecting passages, soft, measured steps that she recognizes as belonging to the death scribe. This elderly woman comes each night to record the details of their work, the position of the body, the expression crafted for the face, the exact hour when the preparations are complete. Her ledger contains thousands of entries, a catalogue of the empire's dead written in her careful hand. Using ink made from lampblack and rosewater, each letter formed with the precision of a master calligrapher. The death scribe appears in the doorway, her grey robe rustling softly as she moves. She carries her writing materials in a leather satchel worn smooth by years of use-reed pens. Small bottles of ink, sheets of paper, made from cotton and silk. Her face is deeply lined, but her eyes remain sharp, missing nothing as she observes the wax lip maker's progress. She nods once, a gesture of approval and recognition, then settles herself on a stone bench carved into the chamber wall, her pen poised to record whatever emerges from the night's work. The presence of the death scribe brings a different energy to the chamber, where before there was only the intimate communion between craftsperson and subject. Now there is the awareness of history, of the importance of preserving not just the face, but the record of what has been done. The wax lip maker feels the weight of this documentation, the knowledge that her work will be remembered long after she herself lies upon a marble slab, her own lips shaped by another's loving hands. She continues working the wax, building up the corners of the young man's mouth to suggest the faintest hint of a smile, not the broad grin of public joy, but something more subtle and profound, the inward smile of one who has found beauty in the world and carries it like a secret treasure. She thinks of the songs he might have sung, the verses that flowed from these lips like honey from the comb, sweet and golden and nourishing to the soul. From another chamber comes the sound of the herbal burner at his work. His voice rises and falls in ancient rhythms, chanting verses from the mystic poets who spoke of death as a wedding celebration. As the souls return to its beloved, the words drift through the stone passages like smoke, wrapping round the workers in their separate chambers, blessing their labor with the weight of centuries of wisdom. Tonight his voice carries the verses of Rumi. Do not grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. The bronze brazier in the herbal burner's chamber glows like a small sun, its light visible through the connecting doorway. The old man feeds it with carefully measured portions of frankincense and myrrh, woods from trees that grow on the shores of distant seas, their resin bearing the dreams of other lands, other peoples who also honored their dead with fire and fragrance. The smoke rises in lazy spirals, carrying prayers and blessings through the underground complex, sanctifying the work that proceeds in each chamber. As the night deepens, the wax lip maker finds herself falling into the meditative rhythm that has become second nature to her. Her breathing synchronizes with the work of her hands, each exhalation releasing tension, each inhalation drawing in focus and clarity. The young man's face begins to transform under her touch, the pallor of death giving way to something that suggests not life exactly, but the peaceful sleep of one whose dreams are filled with music. She shapes the lips with increasing precision, creating the subtle asymmetry that marks them as uniquely human, uniquely his. The left corner curves slightly higher than the right, suggesting someone who smiled more readily on one side, who perhaps had a habit of lifting one eyebrow when amused or intrigued. These small imperfections are not flaws to be corrected, but characteristics to be preserved. The individual marks that distinguish this face from all others. The death scribe watches with the patient attention of one who has witnessed this ritual countless times, yet never grows weary of its mystery. Her pen moves occasionally across the paper, recording details in her flowing script. The lips shaped to suggest song, the expression of one who carried music in his heart. The wax blended with rose oil from the gardens of paradise. Each entry is both practical record and poetic tribute, preserving for posterity not just what was done, but what it meant. In the chamber where the linen binder works, silk rustles with a whisper of wind through leaves. The woman's hands move with the steady rhythm of one whose craft has become meditation, each fold and binding executed with the precision of prayer. She works with cloth so fine it seems woven from starlight, creating shrouds that will preserve their contents through the centuries, protecting the dead from the ravages of time and decay. Her work and that of the wax lip maker complement each other like verses in a song, each necessary to the whole, each incomplete without the other. The young man's lips have found their final form now, curved in the gentle smile of one who has heard the music of the spheres and found it good. The wax has taken on the warmth of the body beneath it, creating a seamless transition between the crafted and the natural. In the flickering candlelight, the lips seem to move slightly, as if about to part in song, to release one final melody into the perfumed air of the chamber. The wax lip maker steps back to examine her work, seeing it with both the critical eye of the craftsman and the compassionate heart of the healer. The transformation is complete, where death had written its harsh message of finality. She has inscribed something gentler, testament to beauty that once animated this flesh, a promise that love and skill can transform even loss into something sacred and profound. The death scribe rises from her stone bench, her writing materials rustling softly as she approaches the marble table. She examines the young man's face with the same careful attention she brings to every subject, noting the expression that has been created, the story that is told in the curve of wax and the patience of craft. Her pen moves across the paper in swift, sure strokes, recording the night's work for the annals of eternity. From the herbal burner's chamber comes a new fragrant sandalwood mixed with rose petals, the scent of paradise gardens, where the righteous rest beside flowing streams. The old man's voice has grown softer as the night advances, his chants becoming whispers that seem to merge with the very stones, blessing all who work within these walls, sanctifying the transformation that takes place here night after night. The candles burn lower in their brass holders, their flames growing smaller but more intense, like stars concentrating their light before dawn. The wax lip maker begins the ritual cleaning of her tools, each implement blessed with rose water before being set in its proper place. The remaining wax is returned to its container, still warm from the night's work, carrying within it the memory of what has been accomplished. As she performs these final tasks, the young man's face seems to glow with its own inner light. The smile she has crafted appears to deepen slightly, as if in acknowledgement of the gift that has been bestowed, the gift of dignity in death, of beauty preserved against the dark. The lips she has shaped seem warm and soft, alive with a promise of songs yet to be sung in whatever realm awaits beyond the threshold of this world. The death scribe completes her recording and returns her materials to their leather satchel. She nods once more to the wax lip maker, a gesture that speaks of professional respect and shared understanding. Their work here is complete, but it is also part of something larger, continuing tradition that stretches back through centuries. A sacred trust that will be passed to other hands when their time comes to lie upon the marble slab. The chamber settles into the profound quiet that marks the end of the night's labor. The candles flicker once more and are extinguished, each flame dying with a whisper that seems to carry prayers into the darkness. As the last light fades, the young man's lips hold their gentle smile, keeping vigil through the remaining hours until dawn brings the final preparations and the journey to eternal rest. The wax lip maker makes her way through the connecting passages, her bare feet finding the familiar path without need of light. Behind her, the musician rests in peaceful dignity, his face transformed by love and skill into a mask of eternal serenity, his lips shaped to suggest all the songs that once flowed from them like water from a sacred spring. The stone steps that lead upward seem to rise into darkness itself, each one carrying her away from the completed work below. But the image remains with Hertha, young man's face in the candlelight, the smile that spoke of music and memory, the transformation that changed death into something beautiful and profound. Above ground, the palace begins to stir with the approach of dawn. Servants move quietly through marble corridors, preparing for another day in the life of the empire. But below, in the chambers carved from living rock, time moves to a different rhythm, measured not in hours, but in the gentle progress of love's most patient work, the restoration of dignity to the dead, the the preservation of beauty against the dark, the endless cycle of loss and remembrance that gives meaning to both death and life. The third night descends like a silk veil over the palace, bringing with it the familiar rhythm of the wax lip maker's calling. She moves through the stone passages with the fluid grace of one who has walked these paths 1,000 times, her bare feet silent against the cool marble, her breathing synchronized with the ancient heartbeat of the underground chambers. The air carries new fragrances to night jasmine from the palace gardens above, mixed with the eternal sense of her craft, beeswax and rose oil, cedar ash and frankincense, the clean mineral breath of deep earth. In her chamber, the candles await her touch, like faithful servants. She lights them with the reverence of one performing a sacred ritual, each flame blooming into golden life, casting shadows that dance across the curved walls like spirits, celebrating the continuation of an ancient tradition. The light reveals a different sort of charge tonight. An elderly woman whose silver hair has been arranged with the simple dignity befitting one who spent her life in service. Her hands, folded peacefully across her chest, tell the story of decades of labor, scarred from kitchen work, stained with herbs, marked by the 1,000 small wounds that come from a lifetime of caring for others. The young novice girl has come tonight, as she does 3 times each week, to learn the mysteries of the craft. She appears in the doorway like a whisper made flesh, her dark eyes wide with the wonder of one who stands at the threshold of understanding. No more than 16 years of age, she moves with the careful reverence of youth in the presence of the sacred. Her own bare feet make no sound as she takes her place on the stone bench where the death scribe usually sits, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing shallow with concentration and awe. The wax lip maker acknowledges the girl's presence with a gentle nod, then turns her attention to the woman who lies upon the marble table. Here was a life lived in the shadows of greatness, in the kitchens and laundries and herb gardens of the palace, tending to the needs of those who made history, while she remained nameless in the ledgers of the great. Yet her face bears the peace of one who understood her place in the vast tapestry of existence, who found dignity in service and grace in simplicity. As she begins to work the wax lip maker finds herself remembering other faces, other lives that have passed through her hands. The concubines with their painted eyes and jeweled fingers, the merchants who smelled of spices from distant lands, the scholars whose hands were stained with ink from a lifetime of learning. Each face had required its own particular expression, its own unique restoration of the beauty that death had temporarily obscured. But this woman presents a different challenge, for hers was not the obvious beauty of youth or station, but the deeper beauty of a life well lived, of service freely given, of love offered without expectation of return. She shapes the wax with infinite care, building up the natural curves of the woman's lips, restoring the fullness that age and labor had worn thin. But more than mere restoration, she is creating something new, a smile that speaks not of what this woman was in life, but of what she deserved to be remembered as. The lips curve gently upward, suggesting not the broad grin of momentary joy, but the deep contentment of one who has given her all and found it accepted with gratitude. The young novice leans forward slightly, her breath barely stirring the perfumed air. She can see the transformation taking place before her eyes. The way the wax responds to the older woman's touch, like clay in the hands of a master potter. There is magic here, she realizes, but it is the magic of love made manifest, of skill wedded to compassion, of the human heart's refusal to accept death as the final word. From the herbal burner's chamber comes a new fragrance myrrh, mixed with rose petals, the scent of ancient temples where prophets walked and angels whispered secrets to the faithful. His voice has taken on the rhythm of the old prayers, the words that speak of paradise, gardens, and flowing streams, of reunion with loved ones long departed. The bronze brazier glows like a fallen star, its light mingling with the candle flames to create an atmosphere of otherworldly beauty. The wax lip maker continues her work with the patient precision of one who knows that perfection cannot be hurried. Each touch of her fingers is deliberate, each curve calculated to contribute to the whole. She creates the subtle asymmetry that marks the lips as uniquely human, the left corner slightly lower than the right, suggesting a woman who is quicker to listen than to speak, who found wisdom in silence and strength in gentleness. The elderly woman's face begins to transform under her ministrations, the harsh finality of death giving way to something that suggests peaceful sleep. The lips she is crafting seem to warm under her touch, taking on the temperature of the body beneath them, creating a seamless transition between the natural and the crafted. In the flickering candlelight, they seem almost to move, as if about to part in blessing, to offer one final word of comfort to those who mourn. The young novice finds herself holding her breath as the work nears completion. She can see the smile taking shape, not the broad expression of happiness, but something deeper and more profound, the smile of one who has loved without counting the cost, who has served without seeking reward, who has found in the simplest acts of kindness the deepest meaning of existence. It is a smile that speaks of kitchens filled with warmth and laughter, of gardens tended with patient hands, of children comforted in the dark hours of night. From the chamber where the linen binder works comes the soft rustle of silk being prepared for its final use. The cloth she works with is finer than anything the elderly woman ever wore in life, woven from threads so delicate they seem spun from moonbeams. Yet there is justice in this, that one who spent her life caring for others should be wrapped in such beauty, should be honored in death as she deserved to be honored in life. The death scribe appears in the doorway, her gray robe rustling softly as she moves. She carries her writing materials in their worn leather satchel, ready to record the night's work for posterity. But tonight she pauses, seeing the young novice at her usual place, understanding that this is a moment of learning, of tradition being passed from one pair of hands to another. She settles herself on a smaller stone ledge, her pen poised, her eyes moving between the master at work and the student who watches with such fierce attention. The final touches are applied with reverence bordering on worship. The wax lip maker shapes the corners of the mouth with infinite precision, creating a smile that seems to hold within it all the small joys of a simple life. The pleasure of bread rising in the oven, the satisfaction of a sick child restored to health, the quiet happiness of sharing a meal with friends. It is not the smile of one who achieved greatness in the eyes of the world, but of one who achieved something perhaps more precious than knowledge, that her life mattered, that her love was not given in vain. The young novice sees the completion of the work and understands, with the sudden clarity that sometimes comes to those who witness true mastery, that what she has observed is more than crafted, is resurrection of a kind, the restoration not just of features but of dignity, not just of appearance but of essence. The elderly woman's face glows in the candlelight, transformed from the harsh reality of death into something approaching the peace of eternal sleep. The smile the wax lip maker has created seems to deepen as the candles flicker, as if the woman's spirit recognizes the gift that has been bestowed. These lips will carry into eternity the memory of all the gentle words they spoke in life, all the lullabies and prayers, all the whispered comforts offered in moments of pain and fear. They speak now of a life that may have been overlooked by historians, but was precious beyond measure to those who knew its touch. The herbal burner's voice rises in a new verse. Words from the old poets who understood that the humblest servant might be the most exalted soul. The saints are hidden among us, wearing the clothes of cooks and cleaners, gardeners and nursemaids. Only in death are their true faces revealed. The smoke from his brazier drifts through the connecting passages, carrying with it the fragrance of paradise, the promise that love given freely is never lost, but transformed into something eternal and beautiful. The death scribe approaches the marble table with her usual reverence. But tonight there is something different in her manner, a special attention that speaks to the significance of what has transpired. She examines the elderly woman's face with the eye of one who has witnessed thousands of such transformations, yet still finds wonder in each new restoration. Her pen moves across the paper in flowing strokes, recording not just the technical details of the work, but something of its deeper meaning. The lips of the forgotten servant, shaped to speak of love's hidden victories. The smile of one whose greatest wealth was the joy she brought to others. The young novice rises from her stone bench, moving closer to observe the final details of the work. She can see how the wax has been shaped to suggest not perfection but humanity, the slight fullness of the lower lip that speaks of gentleness, the subtle curve of the upper lip that suggests wisdom earned through patience. These are not the lips of a queen or concubine, but they are beautiful in their own way, beautiful with the beauty of goodness made manifest. The wax lip maker begins the ritual cleaning of her tools, each implement blessed with rose water before being returned to its proper place. But tonight she performs these tasks more slowly than usual, aware of the young eyes watching her every move, understanding that each gesture is being memorized, internalized, made part of the growing knowledge that will one day bloom into mastery. The craft continues not through books or formal instruction, But through this ancient process of observation and absorption, master and student connected by the unbroken chain of tradition. From the linen binder's chamber comes the sound of silk being prepared for its sacred purpose. The cloth rustles like leaves in a gentle breeze, each fold and binding executed with the precision of prayer. Soon this woman's body will be wrapped in those precious shrouds, encased in silk that will preserve her through the centuries, carrying the smile the wax lip maker has created into whatever realm awaits, beyond the threshold of this world. The candles burn lower in their brass holders, their flames growing smaller but more concentrated, like souls preparing for their final journey. The light they cast grows warmer, more golden, transforming the chamber into a sanctuary of amber radiance, where shadows dance like spirits, celebrating the completion of sacred work. The elderly woman's face seems to glow, with its own inner light, the wax lips catching and reflecting the candle flames until they appear to pulse with life. The young novice finds herself thinking of her own grandmother, a woman much like the one who lies upon the marble tabula, life spent in service to others, a death that passed largely unnoticed by the great world, but mourned deeply by those who knew the touch of her love. Perhaps that is why she has been drawn to this work, this sacred craft of restoration and remembrance. In shaping the lips of the forgotten, she will honor all those whose lives were measured not in gold or glory, but in the quiet acts of kindness that make existence bearable. The herbal burner's chanting grows softer as the night advances, his words becoming whispers that seem to merge with the very stones of the chamber. He burns sandalwood now, mixed with dried rose petals, creating a fragrance that speaks of paradise gardens where the righteous rest in eternal peace. The smoke rises in lazy spirals, carrying prayers and blessings through the underground complex, sanctifying the work that proceeds in each chamber, blessing the transformation that turns death into something sacred and profound. As the final rituals are completed, the elderly woman's face achieves its ultimate transformation. The harsh lines of death have been softened into the gentle curves of sleep. The pallor of the grave replaced by the warm glow of candlelight on skillfully shaped wax. The smile holds steady, neither joyful nor sad, but something more complex, the expression of one who has seen life's full spectrum and found it, on balance, good. The death scribe completes her recording and returns her materials to their leather satchel. She approaches the young novice with the solemnity of one passing along ancient wisdom. Without words, she places a small reed pen in the girl's hands, its surface worn smooth by years of use, its tip stained with the ink of countless records. The gesture speaks of continuity, tradition preserved and passed forward, of the understanding that this work will continue long after all present have joined those they tend. The young novice accepts the pen with trembling fingers, understanding the weight of what she has been given. This is not just a tool, but a symbol of responsibility, of the trust placed in her by generations of women who have walked these passages, who have shaped wax by candlelight, who have transformed death into beauty through the alchemy of love and skill. She will guard this trust carefully, nurturing it as she continues to learn, allowing it to grow within her until she too can work the miracle of restoration. The chamber settles into the profound quiet that marks the completion of the night's work. The candles flicker once more in the slight draught that moves through the connecting passages, their flames dancing like spirits in celebration of another soul prepared for its final journey. As the last light fades, the elderly woman's lips hold their gentle smile, keeping vigil through the remaining hours until dawn brings the final preparations and the journey to eternal rest. The wax lip maker extinguishes the candles one by one, each flame dying with a soft whisper that carries prayers into the darkness. In the growing gloom, the woman's face retains its glow, as if lit from within by the love that has been lavished upon it, by the skill that has restored its dignity, by the understanding that no life is too humble to deserve beauty in death. The three women's master, student, and scribe make their way through the connecting passages together, their bare feet silent on the cool stone. Behind them, the servant woman rests in peaceful dignity, her face transformed by love and skill into a mask of eternal serenity. The smile, shaped from wax and devotion, speaks now for all the forgotten ones, all the humble servants whose lives were spent in love and whose deaths deserve to be honored with beauty. Above ground, the palace sleeps under its canopy of stars. In the courtyards, fountains whisper their eternal songs of water and stone. Guards walk their silent rounds through corridors where sultans once held court, their footsteps echoing off marble walls that have witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. But below, in the chambers carved from living rock, a different kind of power holds sway there. Power to transform loss into beauty, death into dignity, forgetting into eternal remembrance. The young novice clutches her new pen as she climbs the stone steps toward the surface, her mind spinning with all she has witnessed. She understands now that she has been called to something greater than mere craft, to a vocation that serves not the living but the dead, not the powerful but the forgotten, not the grand narratives of history but the small, precious stories of individual lives lived in love and service. The work awaits, patient and eternal, ready to shape her, as she will one day shape the faces of those who come after. Sleep comes gently to the chambers above, carrying dreams of wax and candlelight of faces restored and souls honored, of the sacred work that continues in the depths of the earth, while the world above turns through its cycles of birth and death, power and loss, remembrance and forgetting. The craft endures, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation, ensuring that none who die shall be forgotten, that all who pass shall be honored with the gift of beauty's final blessing. The morning mist had not yet lifted from the golden horn when the wax lip maker descended the worn stone steps to her chamber. Her bare feet knew each depression in the ancient marble, each slight give where countless footsteps had worn the stone smooth as river pebbles. The air grew cooler with each step downward, carrying with it the familiar scents, by of her sacred work beeswax and rose oil, frankincense and the deeper, earthier smell of stone that had stood for centuries. Today, 3 souls waited for her touch. The first lay upon the central table, covered in a cloth of deepest blue silk that seemed to absorb the flickering candlelight. The wax lip maker approached slowly, her movements deliberate and reverent. She lifted the cloth with the same care she might use to turn the page of an illuminated manuscript, revealing the face of a woman perhaps 40 years of age. This had been the chief embroiderer of the imperial household, she who had spent her life threading gold into silk, creating beauty that would outlast empires. The woman's hands, even in death, seemed to hold the memory of countless hours spent guiding needle through fabric. Her fingers were long and graceful, stained faintly with indigo dye that no amount of washing could completely remove. The wax lip maker studied these hands first, as she always did, for they told stories that faces sometimes concealed. These hands spoke of patience, of precision, of a life dedicated to creating beauty one stitch at a time. The chief embroiderer's face bore the serene expression of one who had found peace in her final moments. Her skin, pale as moonlight on silk, stretched smoothly over high cheekbones. Her closed eyes were outlined with the faintest trace of kohl, applied with such skill that even death had not disturbed its perfect line. But it was her mouth that drew the wax lip maker's attention most completely. The lips were thin and refined, pressed together in a line that suggested both determination and gentleness. They had spoken countless quiet orders to apprentices, had whispered prayers over countless threads, had perhaps even sung soft lullabies to children who would never know her name. These were lips that had lived a life of purpose, and they deserved to carry that purpose into eternity. The novice girl sat in her customary place near the eastern wall, her young face illuminated by the steady flame of a single candle. She had learned to arrive before her teacher, to prepare the space with the same reverence that the wax lip maker brought to the work itself. The girl's breathing was slow and measured, her dark eyes following every movement as the older woman began her ritual preparations. From her collection of precious vessels, the wax lip maker selected a piece of beeswax that had been blessed by 7 different prayers. The wax was pale gold in color, pure as the morning sun, and warm to the touch, even in the cool chamber. She held it between her palms, feeling its slight give, fresh under the pressure of her skin, sensing its readiness to be transformed. The herbal burner entered the chamber as he always did, with footsteps so soft they might have been the whisper of wind through cypress trees. His ancient hands carried a brass brazier filled with glowing charcoal, and from a pouch at his waist he withdrew a mixture of herbs that would sanctify the air: sandalwood and rose petals, dried lavender and frankincense, a pinch of sacred earth from the courtyard above. As the herbs touched the glowing coals, smoke began to rise in lazy spirals that seemed to dance in the candlelight. The herbal burner began his quiet chanting, words in Arabic and Persian and Turkish, languages that flowed together like streams converging into a mighty river. His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it filled the chamber with its resonance. creating a space within which the sacred work could unfold. The wax lip maker began to warm the precious wax between her palms, feeling it soften under her touch. She thought of the chief embroiderer's life as she worked, imagining the woman bent over her frame, threading gold through silk with the same patience that now guided the shaping of the wax. Each profession required its own form of meditation, its own surrender to the demands of perfection. The linen binder appeared at the chamber's threshold, her arms cradling bolts of silk that seemed to glow with their own inner light. These were not the rough burial cloths used for common folk, but fabric worthy of an imperial household. The silk was the color of deep water at twilight, shot through with threads of silver that caught and held the candlelight. She moved to the corner of the chamber where her own workstation waited, beginning the delicate process of measuring and cutting the lengths of fabric that would enfold the chief embroiderer in her final rest. The sound of scissors cutting silk was like the whisper of wind through leaves, a soft susurration that blended with the herbal burners, continued chanting. The linen binder worked with the same focused concentration that the wax lip maker brought to her own craft. Each cut precise and purposeful, each fold calculated to honor the dignity of the one who would wear this final garment. The wax had reached the perfect consistency now, warm and pliable, but not so soft that it would lose its shape. The wax lip maker approached the chief embroiderer's peaceful form, her fingers already beginning to sense the contours they would need to follow. She placed her hands gently on either side of the woman's face, feeling the coolness of the skin, the slight roughness where years of close work had left tiny lines around the eyes. With infinite care, she began to apply the wax to the chief embroiderer's lips. The process required the lightest of touches, for too much pressure would disturb the natural shape, while too little would fail to create the seal that would preserve dignity through eternity. She worked from the corners inward, following the natural line of the lips, adding substance where death had taken it away, restoring the fullness that had once shaped words of instruction and comfort. As she worked, the wax lip maker found herself thinking about threads. The chief embroiderer had spent her life following threads, guiding them into patterns that would outlast the hands that created them. Now, in this quiet chamber, another kind of thread was being woven, the invisible thread that connected all who served beauty in their own way. The embroiderer with her golden silk, the wax lip maker with her blessed wax, the linen binder with her careful measurements, the herbal burner with his sacred smoke. The novice girl watched with growing understanding as the lips began to take their final form. She could see how the wax seemed to breathe life back into the chief embroiderer's face, restoring not just the physical fullness of the lips, but something more essential, the dignity that came from a life well lived, the peace that came from work completed. The death scribe entered the chamber so quietly that his presence was felt rather than heard. He carried with him the tools of his own sacred duty, red pens and precious inks, papers made from the finest cotton. He settled at a small table near the chamber's western wall, preparing to record not just the physical details of the chief embroiderer's appearance, but the more subtle qualities that spoke to the character she had carried in life. His pen moved across the paper with the same reverence that the wax lip-maker brought to her shaping of the wax. He wrote of hands that had known the touch of silk and gold thread, of eyes that had seen beauty in the smallest details, of lips that had shaped themselves around words of patience and instruction. Each stroke of his pen was a prayer, each word a small act of preservation against the forgetting that time inevitably brought. The wax lip-maker stepped back to examine her work, her eyes moving before the chief embroiderer's face, with the critical gaze of one who understood that perfection was not just desirable, but necessary. The lips were full and natural-looking, shaped with a subtle curve that suggested the woman's characteristic expression of concentrated attention. They seemed ready to speak, to offer one final word of guidance or comfort. From a small vial, she withdrew rose oil that had been blessed by the palace imam. The oil was pale gold in color, with a scent so pure and concentrated that a single drop could perfume an entire room. She applied it to the waxed lips with the tip of her smallest finger, sealing the work and adding the final benediction that would carry the chief embroiderer into her eternal rest. The herbal burner's chanting had evolved into a different rhythm now, words that spoke of completion and peace, of work finished and rest earned. The smoke from his brazier continued to rise in lazy spirals, carrying with it the prayers and intentions that had guided the restoration of the chief embroiderer's dignity. The second soul requiring attention lay upon a smaller table near the chamber's northern wall. This had been a young page boy, perhaps 14 years of age, who had served in the palace library. His death had come suddenly, from a fever that had burned through his small body like fire through dry grass. His face bore the peaceful expression of youth, unmarked by the trials that age inevitably brought, but there was something in his features that spoke of an old soul, a wisdom that had exceeded his years. The wax lip-maker approached this smaller table with the same reverence she had shown the chief embroiderer, but her movements carried an additional tenderness that came from recognizing interrupted promise. The boy's hands were smooth and ink-stained, marked by the same dedication to knowledge that the embroiderer had shown to beauty. His lips were naturally full with the soft curves of youth, but death had drained them of color and substance. She selected a different piece of wax for this work, one that had been blessed specifically for those who had died young, who had been called to their rest before their time. This wax was slightly paler than that used for the chief embroiderer, with a luminescence that seemed to capture moonlight within its substance. The novice girl shifted her position to observe this second restoration, her young face grave with the understanding that she was witnessing something few were privileged to see. She had begun to recognize the subtle differences in technique that each soul required. The way the wax lip-makers approached changed based not just on the physical characteristics of the deceased, but on some deeper understanding of the life they had lived. As the wax warmed between her palms, the wax lip-maker found herself thinking about the conversations the young page might have overheard in the palace library, the wisdom he might have absorbed through proximity to ancient texts and learned discussions. His lips had been shaped by the silent recitation of prayers, by the quiet repetition of lessons, by the careful pronunciation of words in languages he had been learning to master. The linen binder had completed her work with the chief embroiderer, and now approached with a smaller bolt of silk. This one the color of dawn sky, pale and luminous. She began her careful measurements, creating a proud that would honor the boy's youth, while acknowledging the solemnity of his final rest. The application of wax to the young page's lips required an even lighter touch than had the chief embroiderer's restoration. Youth was more fragile, more easily disturbed, and the wax lip-maker's fingers moved with the delicacy of butterfly wings touching flower petals. She built up the natural fullness gradually, allowing each layer of wax to settle before adding the next, creating lips that looked as though they might still whisper the prayers he had learned by heart. The death scribe's pen continued its quiet work, recording not just the physical details of the young page, but the sense of potential that seemed to hover around his peaceful form. He wrote of hands that had turned, countless pages, of eyes that had drunk in knowledge like thirsty earth absorbing rain, of lips that had been preparing to speak wisdom beyond their years. The third and final soul awaiting attention lay upon a table near the chamber's entrance, as though she had just arrived and had not yet fully entered the sacred space. This was an older woman who had served as a wet nurse to the palace children, her body bearing the marks of a life spent in service to others. Her face was deeply lined, speaking of countless nights spent soothing crying infants, of days filled with the patient work of nurturing those who could not yet nurture themselves. The wax lip maker approached this final table as the candles began to burn lower, their flames creating dancing shadows on the stone walls. The wet nurse's face held an expression of profound peace, as though she had welcomed death as an old friend, someone she had been expecting for some time. Her hands, worn smooth by decades of work, rested peacefully at her sides, still curved as though they held a sleeping child. For this restoration, the wax lip maker selected wax that had been blessed specifically for those who had dedicated their lives to nurturing others. This wax held within it the essence of protection and comfort, qualities that the wet nurse had embodied throughout her long service to the palace children. The woman's lips were thin with age, but they held a natural curve that suggested the countless lullabies they had sung, the gentle words of comfort they had whispered to frightened children in the dark hours before dawn. These were lips that had kissed away tears, that had spoken the first words many royal children had ever heard, that had offered the kind of unconditional love that only comes from those who serve without expectation of reward. The novice girl watched with particular attention as this final restoration began. Something in the wet nurse's peaceful expression spoke to her own understanding of service, of the quiet dignity that came from work that was essential even when it went unnoticed. She could see in the older woman's face a reflection of what her own life might become, a glimpse of the peace that came from knowing that one's work had mattered. The herbal burner's chanting had grown softer now, words that spoke of completion and rest, of service honored and duty fulfilled. The smoke from his brazier continued to rise, carrying with it the accumulated prayers that had sanctified this night's work. As the wax lip maker worked on the wet nurse's lips, she found herself thinking about the invisible threads that connected all those who served others. The wet nurse with her nurturing touch, the chief embroiderer with her creating hands, the young page with his seeking mind, all were part of the same great tapestry that was the palace, each thread essential to the strength and beauty of the whole. The application of wax proceeded with the same careful attention that had marked the earlier restorations. But there was something different in the wax lip maker's touch now. A recognition of shared purpose that transcended the boundaries between life and death. These lips had spoken words of comfort to countless children. Now they would carry that comfort into eternity. The linen binder approached with a final bolt of silk, this one the color of evening roses, deep and rich with the warmth of a life fully lived. She began her measurements with particular care, creating a shroud that would honor the wet nurse's decades of service while providing the dignity that all souls deserved in their final rest. The death scribe's final entries spoke of hands that had known the weight of sleeping children, of eyes that had watched over countless nights, of lips that had shaped themselves around lullabies in languages from across the empire. His pen moved slowly now, as though reluctant to complete the record, to close the book on these three lives that had intersected in this sacred chamber. As the night deepened and the candles burned lower, the wax lip maker completed her work on the wet nurse's lips. The rose oil, applied with the same reverent care that had marked all of the night's work, sealed the restoration and added its blessing to the accumulating prayers that filled the chamber. The three souls now lay in perfect peace, their dignity restored, their beauty preserved. The chief embroiderer, with her refined features and hands that remembered silk, the young page with his smooth face and the promise that death had interrupted, the wet nurse with her worn but loving features and the piece of service completed. The novice girl rose from her place by the wall, moving closer to examine the completed work. She could see now how each restoration was unique, shaped not just by the physical characteristics of the deceased, but by the life they had lived, the service they had offered, the love they had given and received. The wax seemed to capture something essential about each person, preserving not just their appearance, but their essence. The herbal burner's chanting came to its gentle conclusion, his voice fading into the silence like the last notes of a lullaby. The smoke from his brazier continued to rise for a few moments more before dissipating into the stone ceiling, carrying with it the prayers and intentions that had guided the night's work. The linen binder completed her measurements and began the careful process of folding the silken shrouds, each fold precise and purposeful, creating the final garments that would carry these souls into their eternal rest. Her movements were rhythmic and meditative, a dance of fabric and reverence that had been performed countless times in this sacred space. The death scribe capped his inks and cleaned his pens, the records complete, the lives properly documented for posterity. His work would ensure that these three souls would not be forgotten. that their stories would be preserved in the palace archives for future generations to study and remember. As the night's work drew to its close, the wax lip maker moved between the 3 tables one final time, her eyes checking each restoration, ensuring that everything was perfect, that each soul had been honored according to their dignity and their service. The candlelight flickered across the peaceful faces, creating the illusion of gentle breathing of life that continued beyond death. The novice girl understood now, more fully than ever before, the true nature of the work she was learning. It was not simply about shaping wax or preserving appearance. It was about honoring the threads that connected all lives, recognizing the beauty in every form of service, ensuring that each soul carried their dignity into whatever lay beyond the threshold of death. The candles began to gutter one by one, their flames growing smaller as the wax pools deepened. The wax lip maker did not hurry to replace them. Instead, she allowed the natural rhythm of the night to guide the conclusion of the work, letting the growing darkness signal that it was time for rest. The herbal burner gathered his brazier and his pouches of sacred herbs, moving toward the chamber's entrance with the same quiet reverence that had marked his arrival. The linen binder completed her folding and stacking of the precious silks, leaving them ready for the morning's burial preparations. The death scribe secured his writings in their protective cases, ensuring that the night's records would be preserved for future study. One by one, they departed the chamber, leaving only the wax lip maker and her novice in the growing darkness. The older woman moved to the altar where she kept her collection of blessed waxes and precious oils, returning each to its proper place, preparing for whatever souls might require her attention in the nights to come. The novice girl remained at her station by the eastern wall, her young face peaceful in the dying candlelight. She had learned much this night about threads and smoke and rosewater, about the invisible connections that bound all lives together, about the sacred duty of preserving dignity in death. The final candle flickered and went out, leaving the chamber in complete darkness, save for the faint starlight that filtered through the high windows. The 3 souls lay in perfect peace, their restorations complete, their beauty preserved for eternity. The scent of roses and frankincense lingered in the air like a blessing, while somewhere in the darkness above, the great palace settled into sleep. The wax lip maker climbed the worn stone steps one final time, her bare feet finding their familiar path, even in complete darkness. Behind her, the chamber held its vigil over the 3 souls, who would soon make their final journey, their lips sealed with wax and blessed with oil, their dignity intact for all eternity. Above ground, dawn was still hours away, and the palace slept on in peaceable ignorance of the sacred work that had been completed in its depths. But in the quiet chambers below, the threads of 3 lives had been carefully preserved, their beauty honored, their service remembered, their passage into eternity marked with all the reverence and skill that mortal hands could provide. The night's work was done. The season of rains had come to Istanbul, and water traced silver paths down the ancient walls of Topkapi Palace. Far below, in the stone chambers that had witnessed 1,000 sacred rituals. The wax lip maker descended the familiar steps for what she sensed might be the final time. Her hands, weathered by decades of service, moved along the smooth stone walls that had guided countless others before her, and would guide countless others after. The chamber waited in its customary silence. But tonight the air held something different, a quality of completion, of circles drawing closed. A single soul lay upon the central table, covered in cloths so fine it seemed woven from moonbeams themselves. The wax lip maker approached, slowly, her bare feet making no sound against stone worn, smooth by generations of those who had served this sacred duty. She lifted the cloth with hands that trembled slightly, not from age or uncertainty, but from the recognition of something profound drawing near. Beneath lay a woman of perhaps 30 years, her face bearing the serene expression of one who had made peace with her departure from the world. This had been the head calligrapher of the palace scriptorium, she who had spent her life shaping words into art, creating beauty that would outlast empires. The woman's hands told the story of her devotion fingers, stained with the permanent marks of precious inks, nails shaped by years of guiding reed pens across parchment. Her right hand curved slightly inward, as though it still held the memory of the final word she had written. These were hands that had given form to the thoughts of sultans, that had transformed royal decrees into works of art, that had copied sacred texts with such reverence that each letter was itself a prayer. The novice girl sat in her accustomed place, but tonight her posture spoke of changed understanding. No longer did she merely observe. Now she participated in the silence with the full gravity of one who knew she was witnessing the end of one sacred story and the beginning of another. Her dark eyes followed every movement with the attention of one who understood that she was learning not just technique, but legacy. The wax lip maker studied the head calligrapher's face with particular care. The features were refined and intelligent, marked by the subtle lines that came from years of concentrated work in dim light. But it was the mouth that drew her attention most completely, lips that had been shaped by the silent pronunciation of countless words, that had pressed together in concentration as the most delicate passages required their complete attention. These lips had whispered corrections to apprentices, had murmured prayers over each new manuscript, had perhaps sung softly while working alone in the scriptorium's quiet hours. They deserved restoration, not merely for beauty's sake, but as a testament to the words they had helped bring into being, the knowledge they had helped preserve for future generations. From her collection of blessed materials, the wax lip maker selected wax that had been sanctified specifically for those who had dedicated their lives to preserving wisdom. This wax held within its golden substance the essence of illumination, the quality of light that scribes had sought for, past centuries as they labored over their sacred texts. It was slightly warmer than the other waxes, as though it carried within itself the glow of countless oil lamps that had burned through long nights of devoted work. The herbal burner entered the chamber with his customary silence, but tonight his movements carried an additional solemnity, as though he, too, sensed the weight of what was drawing to its conclusion. His brazier held coals that glowed with unusual intensity, and the herbs he withdrew from his pouch included frankincense that had been blessed by 7 different holy men, sandalwood that had aged for decades in sacred storage, rose petals that had been dried in the shadow of ancient prayer niches. As the herbs met the glowing coals, smoke began to rise in patterns that seemed more complex than usual. Spirals within spirals that created shapes resembling the elaborate illuminations that had decorated the head calligrapher's finest work. The herbal burner began his chanting, but tonight his voice carried melodies that seemed to echo from the palace's deepest foundations, words that connected this moment to all the moments that had come before. The linen binder appeared at the threshold carrying silk of such extraordinary quality that it seemed to capture and hold light within its fibers. The fabric was the color of ancient parchment, cream-colored with the faintest hint of gold, shot through with threads that caught the candlelight and threw it back in tiny stars. She moved to her station with the reverence of one preparing to wrap not just a body, but a lifetime of devotion to the written word. As the wax warmed between her palms, the wax lip maker found herself remembering her own first night in this chamber, decades ago, when she had been the one sitting by the wall, watching with wide eyes as another performed these sacred duties. She remembered the fear and wonder she had felt, the gradual understanding that had grown within her, the slow recognition that she was being prepared for a calling that would define the remainder of her life. The novice girl seemed to sense the direction of her teacher's thoughts, for she rose from her place by the wall and approached the central table with steps that were both hesitant and determined. The wax lip maker looked at her with eyes that held decades of accumulated wisdom, and in that look passed an understanding that required no words, the recognition that the time for transition had arrived. Without speaking, the wax lip maker extended her hands, offering the warmed wax to the novice. The girl's eyes widened with the magnitude of what was being offered, but her hands remained steady as she accepted the precious material. The wax seemed to pulse with warmth between her young palms, as though it recognized the touch of one who would carry the tradition forward into the unknown years ahead. The wax lip maker stepped back, but remained close enough to guide if guidance became necessary. The novice approached the head calligrapher's peaceful form with the same reverence she had observed for so many months. Her movements, slow and deliberate, shaped by countless hours of silent observation and gradual understanding. The death scribe entered the chamber, carrying materials that seemed more elaborate than usual parchment of extraordinary quality, inks that had been blessed specifically for recording moments of transition, pens that had been crafted from reeds that grew in the palace's most sacred gardens. He settled at his station and began to prepare not just to record the restoration of a single soul, but to document the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. The novice began to apply the wax to the head calligrapher's lips, her touch light as butterfly wings, guided by instincts that seemed to arise from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. The wax lip maker watched with the pride of a teacher and the sadness of one who understood that her own active role in these proceedings was drawing to its close. but also with the deep satisfaction that came from knowing the tradition would continue in capable hands. As the novice worked, her movements gradually gained confidence, her touch becoming more assured as she followed the natural contours of the head calligrapher's mouth. The lips began to regain their fullness under her careful ministrations, taking on the subtle curve that suggested the concentration with which they had shaped silent words, the gentle pressure with which they had pressed together during moments of intense focus. The wax lip maker found herself remembering all the souls she had tended over the decades, countless faces that had passed through this chamber, each requiring its own particular attention, each carrying its own story of service and devotion. She thought of the concubine from her first recorded restoration, the musician whose smile had seemed to hold echoes of melodies, the servant woman whose simple dignity had touched even hardened hearts, the embroiderer and page and wet nurse who had reminded all who witnessed their restoration that every life, regardless of station, held its own sacred purpose. The herbal burners chanting had evolved into something that seemed less like individual prayers and more like a continuous stream of reverence, words that flowed together like water finding its natural course. The smoke from his brazier continued to rise in complex patterns, creating an atmosphere that seemed to exist outside of ordinary time, a space where past and future merged into an eternal present. The novice completed the basic shaping of the head calligrapher's lips and looked to her teacher for approval. The wax lip maker nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears, not tears of sadness, but of recognition that something beautiful was being preserved, that the knowledge she had guarded for so many years was being passed into hands that would honor and continue it. From her collection of precious oils, the wax lip maker withdrew the vial of rose essence that had been blessed for final sealing. But instead of applying it herself, she placed the small vessel in the novice's hands, closing the young woman's fingers around it with her own weathered ones. The gesture carried the weight of formal transmission, the official passing of responsibility from one keeper of the tradition to the next. The novice understood the significance of the moment. With infinite care, she applied a single drop of the precious oil to the head calligrapher's restored lips, sealing the work with the same reverence that had marked every aspect of the night's proceedings. The oil seemed to absorb into the wax immediately, creating a seal that would preserve dignity and beauty for all eternity. The linen binder had completed her measurements and begun the delicate process of creating the shroud. That would be the head calligrapher's final garment. Her scissors moved through the precious silk with the precision of one who understood that this wrapping would be witnessed by eternity itself. Each fold was perfect, each seam invisible. The entire garment a work of art worthy of one who had spent her life creating beauty through words. The death scribe's pen moved across his parchment with unusual care, recording not just the details of the head calligrapher's restoration, but the significance of the moment when responsibility passed from teacher to student. His writings would ensure that this transition was preserved in the palace archives, that future generations would understand how the sacred tradition continued from one practitioner to the next. As the night deepened, other figures began to appear at the chamber's threshold, elderly women who had once served in various capacities within the palace, their faces marked by the wisdom that came from long years of dedication to duties that the outside world rarely saw or appreciated. They came not to participate directly, but to witness, to offer their silent blessing to the transition that was taking place. The wax lip maker recognized several of these faces' former servants, who had observed her own work over the years, who understood the importance of what happened in these quiet chambers beneath the palace. Their presence added weight to the proceedings, connecting this moment to the long chain of service that stretched back through centuries of Ottoman history. The novice seemed to draw strength from their presence, her movements becoming more confident as she made final adjustments to the head calligrapher's restoration. Under her careful touch, the waxed lips seemed to achieve a perfection that went beyond mere technical skill, embodying something essential about the life they had helped preserve through decades of devoted work. The wax lip maker moved to the altar where she kept her most precious tools and materials. One by one, she began to pass them to the novice. The heating stones that had been blessed by generations of palace imams, the mixing bowls that had been carved from wood taken from the Prophet's own city, the delicate brushes made from the finest sable hair that had been used to apply oils to thousands of peaceful faces. Each transfer was accomplished in silence, but the weight of tradition passed with every object. The novice received each tool with the reverence due to sacred relics, understanding that she was becoming the guardian of knowledge that stretched back through centuries, that connected her to every woman who had served this calling since the palace had first been built on its hill overlooking the Golden Horn. The final tool to be transferred was the wax lip maker's most precious possession, a small knife, made from silver that had been blessed by 7 different saints. Its edge kept sharp through decades of careful maintenance, its handle worn smooth by countless hours of devoted use. As the novice accepted it, her teacher's hand lingered on hers for a moment, a gesture that conveyed blessing, encouragement, and trust in what was to come. The head calligrapher now lay in perfect peace, her restoration complete, her dignity preserved for eternity. Her lips held the subtle curve of one who had found deep satisfaction in her work, who had known the joy that came from transforming blank parchment into illuminated beauty. The wax had captured not just the physical form of her mouth, but something essential about the purpose that had shaped her life. The linen binder began the process of wrapping the head calligrapher in her silken shroud, each movement graceful and reverent, each fold placed with the care due to one who had spent her life creating beauty through words. The silk seemed to glow in the candlelight, transforming the practical necessity of burial preparation into an act of artistic creation. The death scribe completed his records and began the careful process of sealing them for preservation in the palace archives. His work would ensure that the head calligrapher's story was not forgotten, that future generations would understand something of her devotion to the written word, her contribution to the preservation of knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to time. As the night's work drew toward completion, The wax lip maker moved through the chamber one final time in her official capacity, checking each detail, ensuring that everything had been accomplished according to the ancient traditions that governed this sacred work. Her eyes lingered on the peaceful face of the head calligrapher, seeing in those restored features a reflection of all the souls she had tended over the decades, all the dignity she had helped preserve, all the beauty she had helped maintain in the face of death's inevitable approach. The novice stood beside her, no longer student but successor, ready to continue the work that had been entrusted to her care. In her young face, the wax lip maker could see the same dedication that had driven her own decades of service, the same understanding of the sacred responsibility that came with this calling, the same commitment to honoring every soul that would require her attention in the years to come. The gathered witnesses began to disperse, their silent blessing offered, their presence no longer required. They departed as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind only the immediate practitioners of the sacred arts, the novice, who would become the new wax lip maker, the linen binder who would continue her own ancient craft, the herbal burner whose chanting would sanctify countless future proceedings, the death scribe whose records would preserve the details of all that transpired in these quiet chambers. The herbal burner's chanting came to its gentle conclusion, his voice fading into the silence like the last notes of a sacred song. The smoke from his brazier continued to rise for a few moments more before dissipating into the stone ceiling, carrying with it the prayers and intentions that had guided not just this night's work, but the transition of responsibility that had taken place within its sacred confines. The candles had burned lower during the night's proceedings, their flames smaller but somehow more intense, as though they too recognized the significance of what had transpired. The wax lip maker moved among them, extinguishing each flame with the care due to lights that had witnessed the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As darkness gradually claimed the chamber, the head calligrapher lay in perfect peace, her restoration complete, her dignity preserved for eternity. Beside her table stood the novice, who was no longer a novice, ready to begin her own decades of service to the sacred tradition that connected the living to the dead, that preserved beauty in the face of mortality, that honored every soul with the dignity they deserved in their final rest. The former wax lip maker climbed the worn stone steps one final time in her official capacity, her bare feet finding their familiar path even in complete darkness. Behind her, the chamber held its vigil over the head calligrapher, while the new wax lip maker remained below, beginning her own first night of sole responsibility for the sacred work that would define the remainder of her life. Above ground, the palace slept on in peaceful ignorance of the transition that had taken place in its depths. The rain continued to trace silver paths down ancient walls. Time continued its inexorable flow. But in the quiet chambers below, the sacred tradition continued unbroken, passed from one faithful servant to the next, preserved for whatever centuries lay ahead. In the growing darkness, the new wax lip maker began the quiet process of preparing for whatever souls might require her attention in the nights to come. Her movements were slow and reverent, shaped by months of careful observation and years of gradual understanding. The tools of her trade rested nearby, sanctified by generations of use, ready to serve beauty, buyer, and dignity for as long as the palace itself should stand. The circle was complete, the tradition preserved, the sacred work continued. In chambers sealed beneath marble and stone, the eternal rhythm of service went on, unmarked by the world above, but essential to the preservation of what made life beautiful, what made death dignified, what connected all souls in their final journey toward whatever peace awaited beyond the threshold of mortal existence. The night settled into stillness, broken only by the gentle sound of rain on ancient stones and the quiet breathing of one who had accepted the sacred responsibility of honoring the dead with wax and rose oil, with patience and reverence, with a timeless dedication that transformed simple craft into divine service. All was silence. All was peace. The work would continue.